Hey Sugar Geeks, Liz here. Today we're making a patterned roll cake. This is a super fun cake to make that's super simple. Yes, I really mean it. So let's go ahead and get our ingredients together and let's get started. Okay, first step to making a roll cake is making the pattern batter. This batter only has a few ingredients and you can mix and match the colors to whatever you want, but today I'm using blue. This pattern batter makes a lot of batter. So you could definitely cut it down if you didn't want to make so much. Just until mixed, no specific amount of time that you have to mix it to. All right, so now we're just gonna add a drop of electric blue food coloring. When I made this roll cake, I did not mean for it to be Frozen themed, but everybody was like, oh my God, this is so perfect for Frozen. And I was like, yeah, I meant to do that. All right, got that nice and cohesive. Make sure there's no lumps. No lumps, please. All right, so then we take our pattern batter. Pattern batter, pattern batter, pattern batter. Say that 5 times fast. Put that into a piping bag. We're definitely not gonna use all of this, but might as well put it all in there, right? And then we're gonna snip the end off. Or you could even use a piping tip if you wanted to be like super duper precise. I have here a 10 by 15, 16, maybe 9, no, 10. I would say 10 by 15, whatever. I have here a cookie sheet and I'm going to just glue down just the corners here so my parchment doesn't move around. You do not need to grease the pan. The parchment paper is 100% necessary, not wax paper. And if you wanted to print out like a template, like paper, you could put that underneath the parchment here and pipe over the top of that so that you kind of know exactly where you're piping, but I'm just going free for all, not being super specific. I'm just gonna go with the flow. And I'm gonna pipe some, what are they called? Snowflakes. So you make a big cross, like so, voila. And then you put a little X in the middle, like so. And then we're gonna put some little V's on the end. V for victory, because we don't need a template. Ta-da! Snowflake. So you could do whatever design you want at this point. You can make swirls, big snowflakes, little ones. You can do different colors, like only color a portion of this and then make different colors and patterns on there. The options are endless. In theory, you wouldn't even have to like do snowflakes all over this sheet pan because you roll it up and only part of it is visible after you roll it. So what's the point? I don't know, fun? Just do it for fun. Plus it's super satisfying when you peel off all the parchment paper and the pattern is left there. Awesome. Benefits of making a roll cake is you don't have to frost the cake when you're done. You know what I'm saying? It's already frosted. All right, this guy is gonna go into the freezer for exactly as long as it takes for me to make the other batter. So, however long that is. Okay, now we're gonna make the sponge cake. All right, so eggs, sugar, and whisk with my tiny whisk. And technically, you heat these up to 110 degrees, and that's when the sugar dissolves, but I whisk until I don't feel any granules, and that's how I know that the granules have dissolved. And you want to pay attention to your egg mixture. Don't get too distracted. Otherwise, you'll curdle your eggs. You'll get little cooked pieces of eggs in there, which is not what we want. It's almost ready. Almost ready already. Make sure your water is not touching the bottom of the bowl because that will make it too hot. It's just this, using a bain-marie like this, which is where you have bubbling water on the bottom and a bowl on top, is like a safe way to heat up temperature sensitive things like eggs. You know, they get like a little bit warm and then they're suddenly cooked. So it's kind of like giving them a nice bath. Almost there. Okay, that's ready to go. So now I'm gonna put this mixture into the bowl and I'm gonna whip it on high until it triples in volume and gets to the ribbon stage. And the ribbon stage is when the batter lays on top of itself and sits there. So that's super important to getting the sponge cake right. And I think people worry they're gonna over whip. That's hardly the case. Usually it's under whipped because then we have to fold in sifted flour, and when you fold in, that breaks down some of those bubbles. So if you don't whip it long enough, then you're not gonna have enough bubbles. So don't under whip. All right, so we're getting there, and I just wanna show you guys, not making too much of a mess. So I'm scooping this up and drizzling it back in, and it's just dissolving right back into the batter. So it's not ready yet. All right, let's check again. It's definitely getting fluffier. Almost there. The batter is definitely sitting on the surface, but it's still dissolving pretty quickly. So I'm gonna let this go for maybe 1 more minute. I'm also mixing on high, which I don't do very often in my bosh, but in this case, high. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. So normally I would just fold the batter in this bowl, but I want you guys to see how we're folding so you can get a sense of, because that's an important part. So I'm gonna put it into this bowl here. I just like dirtying all my bowls just for you guys. Batter in here. So how to fold batter. When you have this very light, fluffy, you know, batter that has all this air in it, we don't want to knock the air out. So we have to gently fold our batter. I also forgot to add in my vanilla and my salt, so I'm just going to do that right now. And we're going to take a sifter and we're going to just kind of sift in our dry ingredients very slowly. We don't want to, if we just dumped all this in, it would knock all the air out. And then to actually fold, you take your spatula and you go around the batter and you fold it back over onto itself. Hence the name folding. And I'm just kind of like letting it fall off the spatula even. I'm not trying to like mix it. Like, oh, there's a bubble, there's a lump there. Okay, and then once you got a little bit in there, just add some more. Folding takes, you know, patience, which I don't have a lot of patience, but I also do not like remaking things. So that's when I have patience, is when I'm like, I don't want to redo this. So if you were to color your sponge batter, you would want to add that food coloring in when you were heating up the egg mixture. You don't want to put the color in now, because you're going to have a really hard time getting that color like mixed in. If you wanted to make different like colors of batter, I would suggest like color your pattern batter different colors, and then just color this batter one main color as sort of like the backdrop. I think that would probably be easiest and safest. So just going under and folding over. All right, we've got a batter here. So if I was folding too aggressively, this would have deflated and you'd be sad. And there's not really a way to save it, you know, once it's deflated. So try not to do that. And you don't have to worry if there's like a couple of little things of flour in there. It's not gonna hurt it too bad. You just don't want any huge lumps. Also, do not forget to sift, because one time I didn't sift because I hate sifting, and I had big lumps of flour that did not dissolve, so that is important. All right, I think this is as much as I'm gonna be able to get it without further destroying it. All right, we have our pan here that has our chilled pattern dough on it. Okay, so now we're just gonna pour this in here. No special technique. Remember, the pan is not greased. It actually needs a non-greased pan to kind of grab the sides. All right, and then I'm just going to carefully spread that out all the way to the edges. And I actually run my spatula over the edge. You also can't wait, like you have to bake this batter right away. It starts to get spongy. I know that. Like, duh, of course it gets spongy, it's a sponge cake. But it starts to get weird and set. So it's not like a batter, like a regular cake batter where you can just leave it out and then forget about it. You have to kind of bake it right away. So bring it all the way up to those edges. Try and make it as even as possible without fussing with it too much, so that your cake is even, right? You see how the spatula kind of pulls at it? The more you fuss with it, the more it does that. Just deflates it more and more. All right, so now my oven has been preheated to 400 degrees, which seems very hot, but that it's hot for a reason, and that's because we want this batter to poof up really fast and then set, and it's done. So it only needs to bake for 8 minutes. Super fast. It's gonna be very lightly browned around the edges, and we're gonna have everything ready to go to roll it right when it's done. All right, so to roll our cake, you need a couple things ready to go. You need a tea towel. What is a tea towel? Basically, to me, a tea towel is just anything that's very thin. This decorative towel here is also a tea towel. It's very thin fabric. So this is gonna be best for rolling up the cake, because if you use a regular towel, it's gonna be so thick that it's gonna be hard to get that tight roll. So use something nice and thin. And then you also want to have 2 cooling racks. It just makes things easier. There's probably other ways you could do it, but this is just the way that I do it. So I have 1 cooling rack to flip the cake out onto, and then another cooling rack to flip it back over again. So it just kind of makes it easy. And I have some powdered sugar here, which I use to dust the outside of the sponge cake. Ah, my glasses are all fogged up. Okay, so cake is out of the oven. It looks perfect. So now, a lot of things have to happen kind of quickly, because one of the key ways to keep your sponge cake from cracking is to roll it while it's still warm. And because it's sponge cake, it's gonna cool off very quickly. So I'm gonna take a sharp knife, and I'm just going to cut along the edges to just loosen the cake from the pan. Oh, it smells so good. All right, so now I'm gonna put a little bit of powdered sugar on top. This is gonna A, keep the cake moist, and B, it's gonna help it not stick to the parchment paper. Okay, so we now have it like this, and we can just sandwich it together and flip it over carefully. Don't get rid of that yet. Another challenge to this is it's hot, so you gotta be careful. Don't burn your little fingers. Release. Okay. I didn't do a good job of cutting it away from the pan on the edges, but it's fine. So now we get to do the really fun part. Ooh, buddy, look at that. Pretty little pattern on there. Snowflake pattern. I love it. Alrighty then. So now, while it's still warm, here, back over. Now we want to have like a nice tight roll. this is gonna be the center of my cake. So I'm gonna fold this over the top and get it going. Don't worry about it being like too tight in that very center. And just roll it over. The roll cake has memory. I'm just putting this right here because I want that seam to be on the very bottom right there. So now I'm gonna put this into the fridge for about an hour, and then I'm gonna unroll it and fill it with my whipped cream and roll it back up, and it's basically done. We're back. It's been a few hours. So we are going to fill this roll cake with some stabilized whipped cream, which is kind of the traditional filling that you use for roll cakes. But you can use buttercream, you can use purees, you can use ganache, basically anything that you would fill a cake with, you can fill a roll cake with. And the reason I'm gonna do the stabilized whipped cream is because it's kind of tricky to get the whipped cream stabilized. I mean, I don't think it is, but some people are like, help me. So let's do that. So I have some cold water here and 1 teaspoon of gelatin. So the gelatin is absorbing into the water. This is called blooming, and this is when the gelatin starts swelling up and absorbing all of the water. So it starts getting all fluffy, like so. And then we're going to microwave this gelatin until it's liquidy. I do like 5-second increments because it will boil over super quickly. So you can tell your gelatin is dissolved when you don't see any granules in the liquid anymore. So if it still looks grainy, then it's not quite dissolved. And you want to dissolve it a little more. Okie dokie. That's good. Set that aside. So now we're gonna start whipping up our whipped cream. This is just heavy whipping cream. So what we're gonna do is whip this cream to soft peaks so that it's not quite all the way whipped, and then drizzle in our gelatin at the last minute so that when it gets to the point where it's firm peaks, it's not over whipped and starting to turn into butter. At this point, I'm going to add in my powdered sugar and my vanilla. Yeah, it's getting there. Still a little soupy, a little bit more. I almost over whipped that. I just looked over and it was suddenly ready. Woo! Yikes, okay. All right, so now I'm gonna take my gelatin and then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of cream into the hot gelatin to kind of cool it down, and it also like creates an emulsion between the gelatin and the cream so that when this gelatin goes into the heavy whipping cream, it doesn't curdle and get all hard. Boom, stabilized whipped cream. Okay, we have our roll cake that we made earlier. It's all chilled up, so now I can unroll it. So you can already see that it's held its shape because of that, those egg whites. They have memory. Just carefully take this guy out. So on the very inside, you will have like some teeny tiny small cracks, and that's normal. So I don't want you to think that just because there's some cracks on the inside here that your sponge has cracked, because that's not cracking, that's normal. If it cracked on the outside where you can see it, then you'd be like, oh, that's sad. So now we can put our nice stable whipped cream in there. Now imagine this in the summertime with like fresh strawberries. Oh yes. I don't think I'm gonna need all this whipped cream though. Of course I made too much. Nice even layer. I'm trying to get my layer as even as possible, like my layer of cream, so that when I roll it up, it looks really, really nice. All right, so now we're just gonna get that spiral in the center all nice and tight once again, and it's not going to crack because the roll has its memory of how it was rolled up just a couple seconds ago. Squish out the extra cream. So I'm just gonna cut off the end so that it looks nice and pretty. and just clean, and then you can just eat that. So then I'm gonna put this back into the fridge. And you generally want to have the rolls that have the whipped cream on the inside, you want those to chill overnight before you cut them and serve them, because the gelatin takes time to set, like to fully set. Does that make sense? I'm just fussing for the picture. Liz, how do you get your slices to look so nice? Oh, well, I sit there and fuss with the slice. And then we can take our plate and just place it on there. Ta-da! So I would cover this with some plastic wrap just to keep it from drying out, and then it'll be all ready to serve tomorrow. So that's it, guys. That's how you make a patterned roll cake. I can't wait to see all your creative designs using these techniques. I'm Liz Merrick, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Just gonna eat a scrap. It's so good.